You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network.
Talking Mondays. Keep moving up. Keep moving up. Talking Mondays. Keep moving up. Keep moving up. Talking Mondays. Keep moving up. Keep moving up.
Happy Monday. This is Mondays at the Overhead Wire, sponsored by our super generous Patreon supporters. I'm Jeff Wood, your host, and joined by Han Solo. That's right. Every Wookiee's favorite right-hand man is here to share the news from the last few weeks. There's a little bit of a gap in some of my news stuff because I took last week off of writing or actually 2 weeks ago off from writing a newsletter for the Friday. And so for Greater Washington, for Urban Milwaukee and Streets.mn, I write a Friday thing where I collect news and information, the top stuff of the week, or the stuff that I find is the most interesting, and then I post it there. And then usually that stuff shows up back here as summaries. I didn't get to do it 1 week, so I only have 1 week's of popular summaries, but I went back through the news and to see what was in the newsletter of stuff that I could kind of co-opt. There were a couple of things from my Substack / newsletter intro / website blog post that I'm going to talk about a little bit here. But yeah, so we've got a couple of things coming up that are going to be fun, but just note that I'm trying to get this in before the July 4th weekend because next Monday, I imagine not a lot of people are going to be, with July 4th being on a Friday, I think a lot of people take the time off on both sides, so I figured this was probably a better time. Even though we're already in the July 4th week, you could listen to this while you're chomping on your barbecue. But there's lots of stuff to talk about, obviously, and as we're Han Solo, we share some of the Talking Headways podcasts coming soon, so Alana Proust talked with us about commercial space and small-scale manufacturing. We also, and let me turn off this silly emails because they're annoying me. Sorry, California High-Speed Rail Authority. Your emails are bothering me at 5:16 p.m. on a Monday afternoon. Yeah, so Alana Proust came on the show. That was a really fun conversation. Usually we talk about the housing and the transportation end of TOD, but we kind of delved into the commercial side of it and thinking about jobs and those types of things. Really fascinating discussion. I highly recommend people check out Alana's book, Recast Your City, and also her work at Recast City. Madeline Brosen came on this last week and discussed findings from LA's mobility wallet pilots. Oh, what a great conversation. That was really fun to have her on and talk about, mobility as a basic service, basically universal basic mobility, I guess is what I should say. That was really fun to chat with her about that and that topic. I feel like everything is interweaving together really great as we talk about it. Not this weekend or not this Thursday, because this Thursday we're just going to have a replay episode because it is the day before July 4th. It'll be out on Thursday, but people will be gone and doing their thing. And we'll have a really good episode. I'll pick one. I haven't picked it yet, but I'll pick one. But the week after is going to be a Tomer, I should say. He's coming back on the show, has been on with us a couple of times, and we're going to talk about this transportation block grant idea, which turned into a super fast. I mean, it's always fun to talk to a D. I love chatting with him on and off the podcast, but really super interesting discussion. Lots of good quotes from him. Also, a really good discussion about like how we spend our money, why this is actually a better way than giving states block grants. I mean, states like, formula funding and things like that. Really, really fun discussion. Also, I talked with David Prythurch about his new book, Reclaiming the Road, which is all about transportation justice. We dive into some of the stuff actually that Carol Martins and I are going to talk about in a few weeks as well. So really loved talking with David about his book and chatting with him about all the stuff that we love to hear about transportation justice, transportation policy, those types of things. The book is great. I hope folks get a chance to pick it up because you should. There's really good case studies about what happened during the pandemic, specifically all the street closures in different cities, programs to slow streets and things like that. Lots of really cool stuff. So his book will be on the bookshop site soon. I haven't put it up there yet, but it will be soon. And then oh my gosh, we've got a whole bunch of stuff coming up. I don't necessarily have any book reviews scheduled as of yet, although I did get Doug and Sarah and Aaron's book, Life After Cars, from the War on Cars podcast. So that will be, their book is coming out in October. So I think I'm going to talk, or in late October. So I'm going to talk with them in October about that book, but I have a copy, which is really cool. So that'll be coming up. I also have a book called Planning for the Caring City, which looks really interesting. I just haven't contacted the authors yet to set up a time to chat, but I'm sure we'll be able to. And I have some other stuff planned as well. I know I've got stuff on my calendar, but we'll be continuing to do podcasts week after week, and I hope you all are enjoying them. I am enjoying them, and I am enjoying connecting those dots as well. Well, thanks everybody who's ordered the Bus and Bike scarves. We really appreciate that. To order one, go to theoverheadwire.com or email me at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. If you order in bulk, I'll give you a discount. The bike-only knit scarves are back in stock. I'm also, I've talked about this since January, so it's just like 6 months later now. I still am considering designing a new one for trains, but maybe it'll be something like high-speed rail or something along those lines. I don't know. But I know some of you have sent in some good ideas. I'm thinking about it, and it's almost the end of our soccer season for SF City FC too, so they've given me some kind of good ideas as well, because we've got all their scarves from the last several years, as we get one scarf a year. But that's the thing that actually, gave me the idea to do a scarf for transportation, was my San Francisco City Football Club. So I really, 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 really appreciate when I get a new scarf from them. This year's was no joke either. And as we always note, we always thank everybody for supporting the show, whether that's on Patreon, patreon.com/theoverheadwire, or buying books off the bookshop site. You can also support the show by going to that bookshop site and ordering any book you like. And then if you're in our store at that time, it will send us $1 or $2 for the support of our show. bookshop.org/shop/theoverheadwire. I know that for some of you that listen a lot, you have that memorized now, which is really awesome. And also Patreon is really helpful. I had some folks sign up in this last week. I've sent you all your handwritten notes, so I appreciate that. The dollar support also helps as well, because of course now you can get the show ad free. So if you're listening on your podcatcher, you'll get some ads at the beginning, at the end. I'm thinking about maybe putting some in the middle somewhere as well. But you can get it ad free, except for these ads, the ones that I'm doing right now. You'll get those still, but I'll do it ad free if you're a Patreon member for just $1 a month. Just $1 a month. You can get it for free. So check that out. Also, people keep ordering the Cars Are Cholesterol t-shirts and sweatshirts and mugs and stickers and all those things. So thanks for that. You can get those at tpublic.bit.ly/carsarcholesterol. Thanks so much, as always, to Richard Zwazinski, who designed that with me. And you can find him on Instagram at DickDavidSketches. And we also strongly suggest people sign up for the newsletter. That's how we do our work. That's how we get all these news items. That's where all the ideas about things to talk about come from, and all the great folks that are writing news items out there. We really appreciate that, because then it gives us stuff to talk about, and that's really great. So we're on episode 174. We are in session in my studio with myself, of course, Han Solo. But before we get to the show, you guys are with me too, because I know that you're getting this through your podcatchers and Talking Headways as well. You can do it by going to iHeartRadio, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, and of course, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can put an RSS feed. You can also get it, of course, at your Patreon feed if you are a subscriber there. Thanks everybody who subscribes through podcatchers. That's probably how you're listening to the show right now, because I haven't done a lot of advertising for this show, but I do for Talking Headways. So you guys, this is kind of a bonus for everybody who listens and enjoys the show. I do appreciate you guys listening. It's awesome that I can come in here and talk about the news and somebody's listening on the other side. It's always kind of weird to think about somebody walking around a city listening to me in their earbuds, but I do really, really love and appreciate that. Okay, here is the news from this last couple of weeks that caught my interest. A quick note about the news. I do tend to avoid some of the bigger news items that are out there. For example, NBC News had a story about a 7-year-old who was killed by a driver, and his parents ended up in jail because of it. And there's a whole Free Range Kids discussion around it. But that was a big story, and something that I'm sure we'll cover at some point in the future, related to a whole bunch of other things, and maybe even do a podcast on it, a whole episode of Talking Headways, for example. But Sometimes it's something that I kind of, I feel like a lot of folks have seen or talked about a lot on social media, maybe talked about a lot. And so I don't always follow the trends in that way. So I just want to let folks know if you're missing a story that you thought should have been in here, maybe I missed it, or maybe I decided not to talk about it for one reason or another, but we do try to find all the news that is out there, but sometimes we just don't have time to cover everything. So just a kind of a programming note to a certain extent. But we have other stuff that's in the news anyways. LA transit ridership drops amid ICE raids. Los Angeles Metro has seen a 10 to 15% drop in transit ridership since ICE began detaining people on transit in their workplaces and on other public venues. Many immigrants, including those legally in the country, fear going out in public and using transit as the possibility of being detained by federal authorities rises. This was in the Los Angeles Times. I'm really feeling for what's going on in Los Angeles. The economy there has, dropped a bit because people who are working, even if they're citizens, even if they're have their green cards, even if they're legally in the country, they're still afraid because people are getting plucked off the streets who are citizens, who are have a U.S. passport, have all the paperwork that they need to be legally living in this country, and yet still ICE detains so many people because they're black or brown or not white. I mean, that's just insane how much. And then also, they're doing the reconciliation bill right now, and there's like a $45 billion rider for more detention centers for ICE. It's getting really scary. And so I hope people are staying safe. This is really frustrating from a transit angle where these raids are causing people just to not want to go out in public. And that really harms social life, public life, especially if people are feeling unsafe because they feel like they might get detained even if they're here legally, even if they're here, otherwise, I feel like there's a better way to go about it than going with your masks on in unmarked vehicles and scaring the crap out of people. It's just not the way to go. It's not the way we should do stuff in the United States. There's got to be a better way than being a modern day Gestapo. Studying micropollution, researchers at Washington University in St. Louis are the first to have constructed a database of PM1 pollution concentrations that come from wildfire smoke and diesel engines. PM1 pollution, smaller than PM2.5, could cause more health problems because of its ability to evade our body's defenses due to its extremely small size. This was by Leah Schaffer in Washington University of St. Louis Engineering Department News. So this is really interesting because a lot of the discussions about particles and particulates and airborne pollution discusses mostly PM 2.5, particle matter 2.5. And that is the thing that you wear your masks. You can kind of, keep that out if it's wildfire smoke and things like that. But this is even smaller. This is like micropollutants, PM1. So it's even smaller. It's like a very small size. And I don't even know, like it'll, they tell me in the article it's like 1 micron or what. I don't know what a micron is, but it's very, very tiny. And so you can think of that as, even worse for your body than maybe even PM 2.5 because it's actually more insidious. It gets inside of your lungs. It gets inside of your eyes. It can penetrate the systems that are there for blocking particulates from the outside world. And so a lot of this comes from wildfire smoke, diesel engines, other, pollution sources. And they're just finally putting together a database of where these particulates are the worst. It's a really interesting look at what happens when particles are at smaller levels and smaller sizes. And I usually don't do this, but I'm opening up a map, the article and the map right now because I remember there's a map on there and I didn't leave it open. But the PM1 levels, very low, they've actually been able to look at it. And a lot of them are in areas where there's a lot of agriculture pollution, for example. Places like the Central Valley, Bakersfield has it really, really bad. Places in Central Oregon actually is really interesting. Just outside of Tahoe, it's a really interesting map, and it shows also kind of southern states come from East Texas all the way to Florida, all the way up through the Midwest. But interestingly enough, like Nebraska, North Dakota, Minnesota, Montana, Colorado, places like that don't necessarily have much of this pollution, or at least not in the concentration. So it's really interesting to look at this map and see where they're going to start mapping and looking at this data about this particulate matter that's smaller than the regular ones we look at. Reversible architecture. Most buildings are constructed to last a long time, but what if we constructed our buildings to meet our short and medium-term needs, and we're able to easily deconstruct and repurpose them? That's the idea behind reversible architecture, a way of reimagining buildings as systems of building layers, both structural and mechanical. This was by Enrique Tovar in ArchDaily. So this idea of deconstructing buildings after they've been constructed and reusing a lot of the materials, but also, there's different parts of buildings that can go longer and longer than other parts. And so thinking of buildings as like a modular system. So if you created the structure of the building and that's supposed to last like 50 to 100 years, and then the interior structures past like 20, 25 to 30 years, you can start to think about how you can actually recycle buildings or reuse a lot of the materials when you're renovating a building or when you're adaptively reusing it. And so this reversible architecture trend and idea is a really interesting way to think about all that. Managing big event congestion. Transportation leaders in Toronto are proposing reducing transit fares and increasing parking charges during special events to reduce traffic congestion. The move is in part as part of a new strategic parking framework that Toronto City Council is considering. This is by Becky Robertson and blogTO. This is really interesting because if you have a major event and you don't want people driving in a single vehicle by themselves, you can raise the parking charges and decrease the transit fares. And so you're switching things out, making people want to choose the transit. I feel like this is the same thing that like kind of congestion pricing does, or some of the systems that like I guess Paris has put in place when they have these fares and fees for larger SUVs or parking fares or things like that. I mean, people have suggested that there's other ways to do congestion pricing that's not just having a cordon pricing where you have a kind of a surrounding area and you charge a fee to get into an area, but you can also have the high parking fees in certain areas. So if you want to congestion price an area and you don't want people driving in and parking, you can also highly congest the parking spaces where people are going to put their cars, because that might be the same thing as people driving through. Although places with a lot of taxis and a lot of Ubers and things like that, that's likely to not generate as much money from them if you're just doing a parking scheme because people are still moving around. But it might actually be a way to address the issue, unlike the politically fraught possibilities of congestion pricing. Although now in New York has proven that it's valuable and useful, you might be able to get that done in more places now because of what's happened there, which is really, really fascinating. I still think that another interesting thing we don't talk about a lot about congestion pricing is that Kathy Hochul basically lowered the price to below what it was supposed to be. It's supposed to be like $15. Now it's like $9. What if it was at that $15? What if would it work even better? And so maybe we're not seeing actually the full extent to the value that can be generated from congestion pricing because of the lowering of the threshold of what people can handle in terms of driving. And a lot of people have seen value in that, but I find that $15 might be an interesting thing to see in the future if we get further down the line and people are seeing that there's some value in that. Okay, so since I mentioned that we didn't do one of the Friday newsletters in the last 2 weeks, I didn't write down the 4 of the other most read things, although they're going to be in this section because I write them in the newsletter ahead of time. Although sometimes people choose the ones that I don't do the intros for. But these are the bonus items. These are items that I think are interesting, but just some of the ones might have been some of the best of anyways, most clicked, but I just didn't get around to doing it that week. So anyways, North Kansas City has been offering grants for block parties as a remedy for people not knowing their neighbors very well due in part to the pandemic keeping people apart. There's not much funding in the program, but officials hope it gets people thinking about how to reconnect. This is in Kansas City Star. Yeah, I like that. Give people funding, money to hang out, have block parties, get together, do chalk drawings, whatever it is. Like get people together, because I feel like we're having a crisis of getting togetherness lately, and it would be nice to be able to have some excuses. We had the other day, we actually here in Noe Valley, we had our night market, which started off kind of slow and like only a couple of vendors, 1, 2, 3 here. But last time they actually closed 24th Street for a block, and then had all the vendors and had people playing music, and it was great. It was really cool. And so I'm hoping to go back in the future because it really was a really great experience. There's lots of vendors out there. Lots of folks selling good food. So really cool to see those growing and growing from something small to something bigger. And I hope, those get replicated around the city. New research suggests that climate disasters impact babies whose mothers lived through them before they were born. Mothers that lived through Superstorm Sandy, for example, had babies with marked brain differences that could hinder emotional development. This was in Gizmodo. This goes to the fact that people, stress is generational, and the impacts of certain things are generational. And this seems to be true from research and from how people feel, of course. But this is actually a really interesting study that shows that in real life as the stress of climate change gets to people. And so their babies are having impacts. And so I think if somebody goes through a stressful event, it's likely that they're, are likely after the fact is going to have a stressful afterwards. And this is really interesting studies showing that the climate disasters have possibilities of impacting people who are pregnant and their babies. Has everyone seen this chart below? So this was an item that I wrote on Substack that was actually pretty popular this time. There is a chart that shows generation lead, and there was a research paper in 2022 that showed this chart that showed the distribution of childhood blood levels by age in the United States. And so basically, the chart shows that like Gen X had the most levels of exposure to lead and had the highest lead levels in their blood. And so with that being said, there's a chart. I'll link to the article that I wrote, but I'm going to read this out too. I was reminded of this chart, which makes the rounds on social media every now and again when people argue which generation is the greatest or why certain generations seem like they make decisions other generations don't like, mostly piling on baby boomers and also Generation X. I'm a Zennial, 1977 and 1983, so I try to stay out of that fray for the most part. The chart has been changed to include Generation X as a label and was shared in a Substack article, but it is originally from a 2022 paper on an early childhood lead exposure and lost intelligence. From the 1960s to 1980s, lead use peaked and was found in paints, water pipes, and spread out around through the air when automobiles used gasoline full of lead. And the authors found that an average of 6-point IQ drop from Gen Xers in that chart. Pipes and paint chips are bad, but the leaded gasoline was much, much worse. We know auto emissions have really bad impacts, including increased instances of asthma, respiratory disease, and potential connections to cognitive functioning. But this was a whole other level of bad. Now, Pulitzer Prize-winning author Carolyn Fraser has connected pollution to the proliferation of serial killers in the Pacific Northwest. Fraser looked at the childhood homes and proximity to smelting plants that gave off heavy metals like arsenic and lead, and notes that perhaps there's more of a connection than people might have thought. In particular, a particular plant in Tacoma was the source of heavy metals for 1,000 square miles. She cautions that lead was only a factor, but many killers grew up near smelting plants and altogether came off less like Hollywood made them into and more like something that was predictable. This is why it's so frustrating to me when we step back on environmental regulations like mercury at power plants because they are too burdensome or costly. That's an economic cost, but not the whole long tail of cost to the environment and the people that live in it. And we can make decisions today that reduce these harms if we want to. We can move to electric vehicles and electrify the grid. We can get people walking and biking to clean up our transportation and building emissions. I've always said my lungs don't care about your visual aesthetic when talking about overhead wires for trains and buses. I believe that now more than ever. So this is kind of covering like an article that was written about a book that was recently written about serial killers and their connections to these smelting plants and how, the lead in the air led to IQ drops, but also these crazy people that were ended up being serial killers. And I'm comparing that and connecting that to the wants of some Republican legislators and the head of the EPA to get rid of and lower the allowed levels of mercury that power plants are going to be able to release into the atmosphere if they get their way. So just hopefully that doesn't happen, but it's on the table and that's something that they want to do. A block in Oakland went electric all at once with the help of UC Berkeley and the state of California. Research on implementation found that electrification is easier at larger scale because there are built-in efficiencies in buying and implementing plans in bulk. This was in KQED. The Energy Star program that rates appliances and whole buildings for energy efficiency is on Trump's chopping block, but developers and apartment owners from both sides of the aisle are worried that the EPA getting rid of the program will cost them lots of money. This was in Smart Cities Dive. That makes sense. You have this program called Energy Star, which rates appliances for how energy efficient they are. The Trump administration doesn't like it. Their EPA doesn't like it. They want to get rid of it. They think it's a burdensome regulation. But actually what it does is it helps apartment developers and people figure out how much money they can save if they use more efficient appliances in their complexes. And so think about that. If you own an apartment complex and you're paying the electricity for that complex, you want to have the most efficient appliances because then you'll save money overall. But if you don't know, every appliance in that maybe say like 100 unit apartment complex, right? So if you have to spend an extra couple of dollars a month for that 100 units per unit, and then over the course of your amortized, building construction loan or, the loan for your mortgage for buying the property, that's a lot of money. And so getting rid of this system and program that allows people to know how much energy they're saving from buying a certain appliance over another is a big deal. And so why would you want to get rid of that? This is in Smart Cities Dive. China's high-speed rail program has expanded rapidly to 28,000 miles of track only in a few decades, but along with that has come some growing pains and fresh looks at what success looks like. Local commentators are now debating a report from the National Auditor's Office showing financial losses over whether the system is stretched too thin or should be seen as a public good. Interesting arguments in China about they built too many lines, some commentators believe, or whether the system should be seen as a public good. I personally think all of these systems, like the public road system or a national rail network, especially a high-speed rail network that acts as transit, should be seen as a public good and as a way to connect people. And there's been research lately from a lot of the journals that's shown that the proliferation of high-speed rail in China has actually boosted productivity between cities and also in some of the smaller cities that are connecting to the larger cities. And so you can't just measure the benefit or value of a high-speed rail system or a transportation network for that matter from just the amount of money it takes in or the amount of money it expels. The amount of the value that actually is created is from the people that it's connecting and the markets that it's creating and the productivity that's generating. And we just don't do that type of holistic calculations. And it seems like they're not doing that type of holistic calculation either. And so we have to have this argument about whether it's a public good or not versus, taking in the whole of the investment and the outcomes and the impacts that it has. Arizona voters will go to the ballot box in November to decide whether to add a constitutional amendment that would prohibit any taxes based on vehicle miles traveled. Many states and even the federal government are considering alternatives to the gas tax, including VMT taxes. This was in Ballotpedia. So Arizona wants to basically say, no, you can't have VMT taxes, and they want the voters to decide. That's fine, I guess, if you decide that you don't want that, but it seems very short-sighted, especially with more electric cars coming online, and eventually we'll get to a place where electric cars are the majority. I believe that it will be true, and you'll have to pay for your roads somehow, or pay for your transportation somehow, or maybe, there's another way to do it that's better, that actually, it was by weight or the way Japan does it by, engine displacement or something, I don't know, but it seems like Arizona legislators are being short-sighted by putting this in front of the voters. Maybe the voters will be smart and reject it, but who knows? In a joint webinar between Nonprofit Quarterly and Shelterforce, Fernando Marti discussed the potential for creating more social housing by making the investments more like infrastructure and less like for-profit enterprises. This was in Nonprofit Quarterly. Highly recommend this article. He's basically arguing that instead of treating housing as an infrastructure, where like infrastructure we spend on roads and water infrastructure and those types of things, we have low interest loans, we have bond measures, we have funding ways we fund these things, and then we see a rate of return. For housing, we take it from even a more like kind of, I guess you could say, capitalist perspective, where we give money to developers and then they develop the property and they have to have a certain level of profit, and you have all this stuff on top of it. Whereas if we just treat it as infrastructure and we did the same thing we do for roads, and we have low interest loans, we have bonds, we fund it like we do infrastructure, you can actually create some value and do it for cheaper and build cheaper and have cheaper housing. And so it's an interesting look, and I highly recommend reading the item in Nonprofit Quarterly about this, because I kind of tweaked my thinking a little bit. I mean, I'd already thought this way before, but I think it's like worded very, very well. Of course, all these news items will be in the show notes. So if you're listening to this and you go into the show notes, you want to read about it while you're listening, go and click the article, because we'll have it there. In Florida, the state DOT is requiring all new BRT projects to hit 6,000 riders if they are going to take a dedicated lane. It also means existing bus lines could lose their lanes unless they get higher ridership. It's just another example of state preemption going after active transportation facilities and complete streets for taking away somebody's personally believed right to public space. But this has been expected from states like Florida and Texas, who have previously announced their intentions. In Connecticut, hard-fought housing bill was vetoed by Governor Ned Lamont, in part because it got rid of minimum parking requirements, but also because a loud misinformation machine was ginned up to fight the bill. It seems the loudest voices prevailed and kicked the can down the endless road. That is the new way forward, apparently, not necessarily denial, but delay. A new report discusses how climate denial has shifted to delay because the deniers know they have lost the argument altogether. But there's hope, say the mayors of London and Paris, Sadiq Khan and Anne Hidalgo, who have been fighting a war against fear, uncertainty, and doubt with cold, hard evidence and reduced pollutions after years of hard work. Now we know it actually works to reduce pollution and create better quality of life for people living in cities. The tools are there. We just need to share the story of success. This was an item that I posted in my Substack /newsletter/blog on the website, theoverheadwire.com. This was in response to an article basically from Tampa, where the Florida State DOT is trying to rip up bus lanes because of ridership level numbers, which are silly because you're trying to get more ridership to have people ride. You like to have the bus lanes there, and then if the bus lanes aren't there, the ridership will likely drop because the speeds will go down, et cetera, et cetera. Couple more items here. A new ultra-compact e-bike motor is just over 5 pounds and is likely to lead to the development of sleeker urban e-bikes for people living in cities. I love this. As this stuff takes off, as the technology for e-bikes improves, I mean, we've only been working on this seriously for like a decade or so, maybe 2 decades. It's going to be incredible what they can do, creating these bikes that are just going to be like regular bikes, but they have a little motor in them, and they'll get smaller and smaller, and the batteries will get more powerful and more smaller and smaller. And so we'll have just like bikes that happen to be e-bikes instead of just buying having a whole thing about e-bikes. Obviously, we'll have cargo bikes and all that stuff, but it's interesting to see what we can do with a regular bike if we get that technology to be smaller and smaller and smaller. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has moved to remove bike lanes in Toronto due to his belief that they make car traffic worse. But on Bloor Street, during rush hour during a recent count, over 50% of the traffic was bikes and other mobility devices that weren't cars. This is in Carbon Upfront. Yes, that's so silly what's happening in Toronto. I'm sorry, you all that listen to this show that are there and have to deal with this bore. That's so frustrating. I mean, they show that there's value in it. If you put all those people in an individual car, takes up 250 square feet, that's crazy. There's more traffic jam. It's their own fault. Those people are just morons. I feel like just the math is there. The geometry is there. Pay attention. Okay. And finally, a $650 million housing bond in Oregon passed in 2018 has surpassed promises and created almost 5,000 housing units. Rising development costs are making it harder to build, but both Oregon and Portland are still facing housing shortages and homelessness issues. This was in Governing Magazine. Yeah. So that was it for this week. Oh my gosh, lots of great stuff. Lots of interesting stuff. I love going through every week and finding all these interesting articles and people talking about solutions and wins and stuff like that. It's so great. This week and every week, I want to thank our generous Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome and keep the show going by listening and supporting each month. This show and Talking Headways really wouldn't be here without you. So thank you very much. And you can support the show by going to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. We've had people sign up each month for the last several years, even through the pandemic. So we're super appreciative of that. $2 a month will get you some stickers and a handwritten note. $10 a month will get you one of our scarves. And if you want a scarf, you can get one at theoverheadwire.com. I know it's summertime. I know a lot of places are like 100 degrees, but maybe you can sock it away for winter because that'll be cold. coming up. I'll advertise them more, I think, when winter comes. But it is summer. You can order it now. Maybe I should do like a summer discount on the scarves. Email me if you want a scarf and you want to get a discount. Send me an email, theoverheadwire@gmail.com, and I'll get you one. Also, I want to mention we did produce an audiobook version of Raymond Unwin's 1909 classic, Town Planning and Practice. And if you want to get your hands on one, go to raymondunwin.com. Or I should note, you can rent it from Libby in your public library. It's there. It's really cool. I looked it up the other day. I rent books from my public library all the time, borrow books from my public library. I borrow audiobooks from the public library through my Libby app. You can get this book there too. So you don't have to pay me. Just get it for free. Public library, then people will get download and you can get this book. There's also, I think I get a lot of like, I wrote down like the timestamps and I did a Word document with the whole thing. So you can read through it as you're listening to it if you wanted to. And it's on Amazon. You can buy it for like $1. And like, I get all of these like, 10-cent checks from like checks, but like money transfers from like Japan because somebody in Amazon Japan wanted the Raymond Unwin book. So that's cool. All this weird stuff happens when you do weird stuff like do an audiobook of a famous planning book from 1909. In any event, some fun stuff. Listener questions and comments. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to tweet us or comment on any of the social sites where the podcast appears. Feel free to email us at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. Some of you find me at my work email even, which I usually don't share on here just because, but feel free to email me there too. I know you all have it, so send me a note. Theoverheadwire@gmail.com is the best way to get me, but you can get me anywhere you can find me. Still, I'm getting responses from a few shows ago. I'm on that travel show for transit. John Steelglitz sent in a note. Hey, first time emailing. Love the show, and you'll love this YouTube video. It's so good. And then he sent a link to this video by Brian E. Morton with the intro line, "Can you eat Michelin Guide approved food in LA on a budget? I put it to the test by visiting 6 of the cheapest Michelin recognized restaurants in Los Angeles, spending less than $100 total and getting to each spot using public transportation." That is something I can get behind for sure. So go check out that video by Brian Morton. I'm going to have it in the show notes. Thank you, John, for sending that over. It reminds me also of our friend Nathan Landau, who was a planner for AC Transit for a long time. He retired recently. But back in episode 87, we shared his car-free travel guide to Southern California and LA. I think it's still in the bookshop site if you want to check that out too. It's probably dated a little bit by now, but you could probably still get to all the clubs and restaurants that you want easily by transit, and it's getting easier all the time. So if you have any questions, shoot them over to theoverheadwire@gmail.com. If you have any comments, send them to me, positive, negative, just saying hi. I love to hear from you all. I think in my newsletter last couple of weeks, I was like, I made a call for people to at least hit the reply button in the newsletter. Tell me that you're there. People out there, are you there? Are you there and listening? I know a lot of you all are listening because I hear from you a lot. But sometimes I wonder if I'm just speaking into the microphone, into the void, into my office. But I know I'm not. But it's nice to hear from folks too. I really appreciate that. Okay, puppies and butterflies. This is the part of the show where we talk about something fun, interesting, or maybe it just didn't fit in the other sections. I'm talking really slowly so I can get to a note that I wrote myself. Okay, so someone used a bike share for the Mont Tremblant Triathlon. So Montreal's Nicolas Malgoy rode a Bixie bike for the 40-kilometer bike leg for this triathlon, which is hilarious. If you think about it, I'm just looking at this TikTok right now, and it has the Bixie bike on the shelf for when he was going to pick it up, and that's awesome. I love it. He rode the bike in the triathlon, which is just amazing. Way to advertise bike share. It's so great. Maybe he lost his bike, or maybe it was just something fun to do, but that's really cool. I love that for my puppies and butterflies this week for sure. Let me know if you all have any puppies and butterflies. I'd love to hear from you all about some fun stuff that happened, or funny stuff, or something lighthearted, because it's pretty heavy these days, as you know, and going through the news every day. Oh my gosh, I'm just like, please get me something fun. And that was fun. Riding a Bixie bike for your triathlon bike leg. Hilarious. Okay, well, and then in TV shows, I'm not really watching much. Oh, Stanley Tucci, I finished all 5 episodes of that. We talked about that a couple episodes ago. And mostly, I'm not watching much television, honestly, if I'm being honest. So when something comes back up, I'll be excited to share with folks. But I haven't been really watching stuff. I did watch some pasta YouTube shows that my brother-in-law sent me. I can't remember the name of it now, and I'll look it up later. I'll put it in the show notes, but really cool stuff, really fun stuff. Learning about cheese, learning about what kind of cheese is what, learning how to make pasta, different egg ratios, things like that, or no eggs, what kind of water, what kind of flour. There's different types of flour for different types of things. Awesome stuff. So cooking shows are always a fun thing too. Well, you can find me on Blue Sky, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Instagram, sometimes on Threads, Substack, YouTube. I'm getting punchy. It's now 5:54 on a Monday night. And of course, my website in your inbox every day if you sign up for the newsletter, and Flickr is Transit Nerds, and everything else that's at the Overhead Wire. I saw somebody followed me on Flickr at Transit Nerds recently, so it must have been one of you all, because I haven't shared that in a while. But there's lots of great pictures about transit stuff, and it's all CC share, so if you want to use it for like a report or something like that, some of those pictures, feel free to do so for like a report. I know that those are hard to come by, so let me know and we'll get those to you to use. Thanks for joining us at Mondays at the Overhead Wire. Thanks to our generous patrons for sponsoring this week's podcast. We'll see you after the 4th of July.
Talk